Hello, my name is Caleb. Welcome back to another round of Caleb Talks About the Week in Music. I don't have a real name for this. Again, I'm still kind of trying to figure things out. Last week was just in some audio. This week I decided to try video and try a little something different. Just gonna go through and talk about the music that I posted about on Twitter and Instagram throughout the week. As you can see, I go by Caleb the Spy on both Twitter and Instagram. I love posting about album anniversaries. I've always found it fun to have a calendar of some of my favorite releases. And over the last 6 months or so, that calendar has expanded and expanded and expanded. So occasionally there's days where I'm doing 10, 11, 15 posts just about the music that I love, music from my collection or music that other people have recommended. And I thought it'd be fun to, again, I'm trying to figure out some of this audiovisual stuff, some of the podcasting. So I thought it'd be fun to try and record a video of me talking about it. Some audio last week, try and video this week, see how this works. This week, I'm also going to talk about a couple different things. I want to talk about some new music too that I listened to this week, and just kind of go through some things that caught my attention throughout the week. So bear with me. I have a lot I want to cover. I'm going to go fast, just because I want to get through it all, and I want to try and keep this to a reasonable time. So thanks for tuning in, and if you're listening, I appreciate if you've listened to 30 seconds of this, 5 minutes of it, or you get through the whole thing. I appreciate it. I'm always looking for feedback, so let me know what else you would change and what else you would improve upon. So let's dive in. Let's talk about a couple new albums that came out recently or in the last couple weeks that I wanted to mention. So the first one is the Menzingers. They are a punk band of sorts out of Philadelphia. Their new album, Some of It Was True, came out a couple weeks ago, and I love this band. I have all not all their records. I have about four of their records on vinyl. I think they're great. I love that they have a punk rock sound that still feels nostalgic. I don't know what it is about that. Kind of like Gaslight Anthem. The Menzingers have that cachet about them where they just feel like they're talking about stuff that feels very, very nostalgic without feeling immature. It's a real fine line that they walk. This album is growing on me. My first listen, I was not blown away by it, but I am enjoying it more. I do think it misses some of the catchiness of After the Party. That's their best album in my opinion. I wish I had more sing-along songs, more anthemic moments. But it is growing on me with each listen. You know, I do think it's a little long. It's a maybe about three songs too long. It's also just I think they are going for a little bit more of a mainstream feel. They're on some billboards. They're pushing it that way. I hope they all the success to them. I got to see them back in 2019, right after Hello Exile came out. I believe it was Hello XL. It was not From Exile. It was Hello Exile pre-pandemic. It was a great show. I really do like those guys, and I hope they continue to have success. But I think you should check it out. I think you should check out their music. It's just again that real fine line of um, producing punk music that doesn't feel immature, but feels nostalgic at the same time. Another album I wanted to talk about that I listened to this week is Penelope by a band called Small Crush. They're on Asian Man Records. I'm always excited to give the Asian Man Records releases a listen. I think there's a lot of potential in this release, in this group. They sound a bit like maybe a bit like the Beths, but just not as well refined. I think if they can kind of get their choruses to be just a little bit more hooky, I think they could blow up. Good sound, worth checking out. If you like kind of that power pop punk influenced with a female lead singer, this is probably something worth checking out. And again, anything you can do to support Asian Man Records, I think is always good. But that was an album that came out in the last couple weeks that I did check out this week, and I thought "Oh, there's a lot of potential here." So I hope they continue to put out more music, and we'll see where they go. So that was kind of some of the new ones. I did listen to the new Blink 182 today. I'll maybe talk about that more after a week. I kind of want to set with it. I set with it. I didn't think it was bad. I didn't think it was great. I thought it was Blink 182. It was better than their last album they put out as this three, but we'll tackle that at another time. Plenty of other things to talk about because let me tell you, it was a full week of album anniversaries. Thursday alone, I think it was the 19th. That that day alone, there was 11 great albums to listen to, and I pounded through them all, and it was just a fun day of music to partake in. So let's talk about the week in music for me. First one up is Worry by Jeff Rosenstock. This came out in 2016. It is number 6 on my all-time favorite list, and I love this album. I still think it's his best work. His newer stuff is great too, but there is just something special about this album. The back half of it, the side B is just it rolls kind of like the back half of Abbey Road. It rolls from one song to the next. There's some genre shifting, and this album it walks this really interesting line where it feels like desperation put to tape. That is how it feels, but yet still has moments of hopefulness in it, which maybe it's just me, but I think it walks this line well where it doesn't feel depressing, but yet feels desperate. And it's just a really interesting listen. Jeff is become easily one of my top 10 artists, maybe even top 5. I really love his work, and this is his, my opinion, it's my favorite album that he's done. Came out in 2016. It's called Worry, and the final song ends with the phrase "Love is worry," and it's a really interesting concept to think about. I don't think a lot of people have made that comparison that love equals worry, and there's a whole existential discussion that could be had there. But I really love this album. I think Jeff does great work, and this album in particular is a great listen. All right, next album I want to talk about. Again, I'm going to go fast. Sorry, I'm already 7 minutes into this, and I've got a whole list of albums I wanted to touch base on. So go check out Worry. If you're okay with the swears, go check it out. It's absolutely worth your time. All right, next album I want to talk about is A Catch for Us the Foxes by Me Without You. Came out in 2004. So, confession time. My experience with Me Without You was I heard the Cookie song, the Fox and the Cookie and the Raven, and I thought, "Oh, that was fun. What else do they have?" And I listened to their other songs and I thought, this is not the Cookie. Do they have more Cookie songs? I'd like a couple more Cookie songs. Thank you very much." And I just didn't get it. I'm not a huge hardcore fan, and I know they're not totally hardcore. They're post-hardcore or whatever you want to call them. But I don't tend to go for that stuff. I tend to be a little more pop. I've said it a couple times that like, well, not on this, but the center of my music falls around that pop punk ska of the 90s. That is kind of where my music centers and then kind of goes out from there. So I didn't totally get them, and I really didn't take a deeper dive into them until probably after they had announced their farewell tour. So I was that late on them. Full confession, failure on my part. But I really have started to enjoy them. I have a number of their albums on vinyl now, and I really love this album. A couple of their albums have made it into my top 150. This one isn't there, but I do enjoy this album quite a bit, and I've kind of set one of the goals for the rest of 2023 is I do want to sit with the Me Without You albums and actually read through the lyrics as I listen to it. One of the I'm all for people discovering bands late. I think that's great. I don't think you're ever too late to get into a band. That's my opinion. If you like a band, you should get into them and you should be able to partake of them and dive into it. The disadvantage obviously is that if they have 6 records, can't just sit with it for 2 years before the new one comes out. I've been with Five Iron Frenzy. They're my favorite band. I've been with them since the beginning. And so when a new album comes out, I listen to it nonstop for a year or 2 years until the next one comes out. I just devour it. And you don't have as much of a chance to do that if you get into a band late. And that's absolutely what's happened with me and Me Without You. So one of my goals for this year is to really dive deeper into them, try and really digest those lyrics. Because every one I catch is very intriguing. Obviously, it's a big attraction to them. Their wall of sound is good too, but that's a big attraction to them is the lyrics. So that's one of my goals. This album, I really do like this album. Those first three songs feel like a statement of arrival. Here we are. This is us. Come and get us. And I really think those first three tracks do. There's some other great tracks on it too, but those first three are just kind of hard hitting and really set the tone for what their career would be. So that was a great album to enjoy. I enjoyed it on vinyl this week. Catch for Us the Foxes, and I'm gonna mess up their names. I'm gonna mess up a lot of these titles. I said it last week. I don't get to say these out loud very often. I realize that I write them a lot on Twitter or Instagram, but I don't say them out loud very often, which is kind of funny. So anyway, let's go on to Lockdown by Ethan Luck. So Ethan Luck is a person who has been in just a ton of bands throughout his time. He's been in Demon Hunter, the Dingies, the Supertones. There's way more. Reliant K. How did I forget Reliant K? He's been in a lot of bands. He's also helped out with a lot of other bands. He's done studio time. He was on one of the albums we're going to talk the album we're going to talk about next as well. He's been around the music industry for a long time. Right now, he's working as the photographer for Switchfoot on their current tour. He has been around a long time. He's done some solo work, and during 2020, kind of when everybody was in lockdown, he put out some covers on his YouTube channel with some old friends, and then he put out this album as well called Lockdown. It's just, I think it's like six covers. You can see the titles there: Witness, Mad World, Heaven, so on and so forth. He put out this album. It was just six covers. They're kind of in a ska reggae style. It's very good. I really like it. I'm pretty partial to the ska and reggae stuff, but I really liked it. It was up on Spotify for a while and was on Amazon. I actually bought it off Amazon and it's no longer available. I think part of it is the cost of covers. I think how you pay for those and pay for the rights to do those can be a little tricky. So he did take it down eventually, and it's kind of a bummer. I wanted to people to go be able to check it out and realize that they probably can't. So that was kind of a bummer to realize, but it also is a good advertisement for supporting your indie artists. If you can buy something, buy it if you can. And I get it. Not everybody has endless amount of disposable income, but if you can, get it because it's gone. There's no real way to listen to it right now. Maybe some of it will come back. Maybe he'll put a couple of these on another release. But yeah, it was kind of a bummer to realize that people couldn't go and just grab it. Some old friends on it. Dan Spencer from the Supertones is on it. I always say his name wrong. Brent Baker from the W's was on it. And again, just a really fun little six-song cover album. And I'm excited for more work from Ethan. I know he's doing some other things right now, but I hope we get to see more and more music from Ethan. I always really enjoy what he puts out. Okay, next one is Brace Yourself for Mediocrity. It's by Roper. It was their only album. The lead singer of Five Iron Frenzy, after their breakup, Reese Roper, put out this album with, he did a lot of the writing on it, but this is another example. Ethan Luck did help out on this album as well. It was released in 2004. I absolutely love this album. It is number 11 on my all-time favorite album list. It is punk perfection, in my opinion. There are no skips on this album. It is just great all the way through. It just blends that it's silly at times, almost from the get-go. It's silly, a little self-deprecating, and yet it is still serious at times, very, very serious at times. The song Quicksilver is definitely a serious song tackling just feelings of inadequacy. Amplify is a worship song. The last song is definitely a worship song. It talks about other things as it goes, but this is another example of I'm still glad I have one of my CDs. I realized I bought this album twice because my car got broken into, and this was stolen. And so I went back and repurchased it. Another album that is just not available on streaming. So another argument for going out and buying those albums, buying as much as you can from independent artists. I love this album. If you do have it, or if you can get your hands on it, I don't think it's crazy expensive. Um, I haven't looked in a while. Maybe it is, but absolutely great album. To have. All right, last in our series of albums that are not available on streaming is the W's Trouble with X, released in 1999. Sadly, their last album, I think the swing band, super talented group, I put this on Twitter, super talented group, but I think the swing band was always going to be short lived, which is just a bummer. They broke up actually, I feel like they broke up a real right after this album. It was not long, and I don't know. I think because of that I didn't give it a ton of listening. I didn't go deep on it. I think I was kind of disappointed that they had broken up, and I just didn't go as deep on it as I went on their first one for sure. Which is kind of a bummer. Just because it's a great album. A lot of people mentioned the song "Stupid" as a really provocative, interesting song. Their sound, again, that swing sound, I don't, it never blew me away, but unfortunately, this is one that is not available on streaming. You can find it on a certain site where you can watch videos. So it is possible to find it, and it's actually, if you live in the States, it's fairly cheap on eBay. I found it for like $7 because somebody was asking about where you can get it. So definitely worth going back and checking out. Gotta love the W's. Glad we got a couple albums out of them, but unfortunately didn't get any more. Okay, I'm gonna keep on moving because I still got a number to go through, and I'm running short on time. I don't want this to run too long. Okay, the next one is this. This is always, I learned this a couple years ago and really interesting, but the Specials and Madness, two of the pillars of the two tone movement, both put out their debut album on the same day. I think it's October 19th, 1979, which is pretty crazy to me that both of these albums, we'll get to one other album that also came out that day. But both of these albums come out on different record labels and kind of really kick off the two tone era. I would say that these are the albums that take ska out of Jamaica and send it to the world and send it to Europe at the very least, and it would get over to the States eventually. But yeah, these are two classic albums. I think that Specials album, I love it. It starts with A Message to You, Rudy, which is just a great little pop song in a lot of ways. That album is produced by Elvis Costello, which is a nice little trivia piece, and is just in my opinion, just a classic album. And then One Step Beyond by Madness starts with a super fun instrumental track. They would go on to have a couple huge hits that were not really ska hits, but they're more new wave sound. But I actually, one of the surprises of the week was I was really excited to listen to the Specials and the Madness album. After that first instrumental, there's a couple kind of weirder songs. I was actually really grooving to the back half to side B more than I probably have in the past, but I think pretty hilarious that these both came out on the same day in 1979. So yeah, I'm all for the ska, and was happy to re-listen to these albums. All right, next is was a big one. A lot of people were really excited about this. Jimmy World Futures came out in 2004. This a lot of people would consider this their best work. It's a favorite of a lot of people, and it's very good. It's right there for me, maybe number two for me still. But really, it's a really solid album. I think it does lag a little in the middle. There's two songs that lose me. I'm getting a little picky, but I don't enjoy Night Drive. It just seems out of place, especially with how beautiful 23 is. And the song I mentioned, the song Drugs or Me, that song loses me for some reason. I don't know why, but it does. I don't know why that song loses me a little, but a great album. Totally, I totally understand why people love it. Really fun to listen to, really interesting, dynamic, um, just good, solid pop, emo, punk, I guess is how you'd call them. They're probably about as emo as I get is Jimmy Eat World, but that one came out in 2004, and just another great album. All right, got to keep moving. Let's go to a couple more. I'm gonna fly through these next three. So this is High Bop Ska. It's by the Skatalites. Skatalites. Came out in 1994. They mostly do instrumental albums, just ska instrumental albums. And this one's great. It's probably their best. It's great to listen to. And, ska puns. Can't go wrong with ska puns. Next one is Propane by Mars Ill. Came out in 2004. This one is a bit of a bummer to me. Mars Ill is probably my favorite rap group. I really loved Backbreakonomics. It's the highest hip hop album on my favorite albums list, and it's just great. It's like number 20. I love that album. This album, not as good, in my opinion. It's a little bloated, and by the end of it, it just kind of drags on a little long. That is a personal complaint I have of a lot of hip hop albums, just to be real honest. I think they go on. I think a lot of hip hop albums would do well to cut a song or two and try and bring that runtime down. This one in particular, I can feel it. This album also just was hit with major delays. Maybe major is an overstatement. I think it was delayed at least a year, maybe even longer because of a sample. Either they couldn't get the rights to it or the rights were too expensive. I do not know the exact details. If somebody else does, you should trust them. But it did delay the album for almost a year. And I think that potentially really hurt their career. I think it really maybe even kind of killed their career off. They just lost some of the momentum coming off of the last album. It throws off that album cycle. All of a sudden, I think there's 3 years, maybe even four in between their two albums, and it just seemed to kind of come out and not hit the way I think they hoped for it. Because I think this was on Goatee, so it was their first real um, major label release, and they've gone on to do other things. Dust is doing a lot of music videos. I know he's done at least a couple for Lecrae, and he's doing just fine. But it did seem to kind of kill this duo, which is a bummer because Backbreakonomics is a great album. So I still was happy to listen to it. I blasted it while I was cooking one night, which is my happy place. So I was happy to blare it through the kitchen while I was cooking. But it's kind of the story behind this album is a bummer. Okay, I got a couple more. I got to take a drink of water. If you made it this far, I'm just going to be unprofessional and take a drink of water. Okay, so I mentioned it before. One more album that came out on October 19th, 1997 was Prince's self-titled album. I'm Minnesotan. I love Minnesota. I hope to live here the rest of my life. So you got to mention the Prince albums. What I like about this album is it's a fun story. I've heard the story is that this is with Warner Brothers. It's kind of his first major label album, and I've heard the story that he starts recording and they want him to come out to this studio out in California, and either he does or he doesn't, but he just kind of they're like, "Hey, here's your producer," and he just goes, "No, I'm not using him. I'm doing it myself." "Oh, here's some studio musicians." No, I'm not using them. I'm doing it myself." "Well, here's a photographer." No, I'm not doing that. I got my own person." "Well, here's an engineer." No, I'm doing it myself. Just across the board, did every last thing on this album and totally owned every last part of it. Pretty funny story, especially in today's age where, you get 30 writers on a song, but just very, very interesting in my opinion. So that's why I wanted to mention that album just just real quickly. And the last one that I want to I a couple more that I want to mention, but the last one, this was a big surprise for me. This is Justin McRoberts' album from 2005 called "Grace Must Wound." I love McRoberts. In general, I'm not a big singer-songwriter guy. I had kind of a phase where I was into it. I still, if the album's good, the album's good. But this album was great. I listened to this today. I listened to it twice. I listened to it once while I was at work, and then once while I was helping my kids around the house with some chores. And this album is great. It is just an absolutely brilliant album. I really forgot how good it is. Somebody on Twitter mentioned that it has more of a Nashville sound. So maybe that is and it's part of the enjoyment of it. The first four songs are just absolutely excellent. Safe is a wonderful song. The song is good. I think Justin McRoberts is horribly underrated. I'll say it. I think of the singer songwriters that came out of that CCM world in the late 90s, early 2000s. He is the most underrated. And maybe that's overstating it, but I really love his work and this is a great album. Came out right in the middle of that. If you have not checked it out, I believe it's on streaming. Go check it out. Worth your listen, worth your time. So that was one more that I wanted to mention. And then there was two that came out that just had huge birthdays that I wanted to mention. The first one is the Wailers, Bob Marley and the Wailers. Burnin' came out 50 years ago in 1973, and Versus came out 30 years ago in I have 35 written down, but 30 years ago in 1993 by Pearl Jam. I listened to both of those this week, and what I found really interesting was just they feel like classic records that no one is ever going to get bored of hearing. That's the impression I got is I was listening to them going, yeah, I can absolutely see why people who like this are going to keep on liking this. They just sound like classic albums that are not growing old, that are not getting stale. I think they're albums that in another 30 or 50 years, people will still listen to and go, those are talented people just making great music because that's what they sound like. Um, my favorite Pearl Jam song, and I'm going to forget it, the Elderly Woman song. It's a much longer title. That is my favorite Pearl Jam song. And it's just, it's a wonderful song. It's nice and calm and beautiful. And then Burnon's got a couple great songs. Get Up, Stand Up, and I Shot the Sheriff are both on that album. Just great, great stuff. So those were fun anniversaries. Not often you get to listen to an album that's 50 years old and you still think, yeah, this is just as good as it was 50 years ago. So that was the albums. I was running through things crazy fast, and I'm still going to be at like almost a half hour. Uh, if you listen to any of this, I really appreciate it. It's a lot of me rambling. Thank you so much for listening. I'll try and do this every week. I'm going to try and get better at not saying and as I ramble to myself. But again, you can find me at Caleb the Spy on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and Caleb the Spy with the underscores on Instagram. I love putting out the album anniversaries. It's always super fun to get a chance to listen. So Thanks for checking this out if you did. Even if you didn't, thanks for not checking it out. That doesn't work. More great albums to come next week. Joe Strummer's Street Core, one of my favorite albums. I just got it on vinyl, just listened to it before I recorded. Super excited to talk about that. Probably talk about the Blink 182 album as well next week and stuff like that. Thanks, and hope to see you next week.